Welcome to Conversations from the Edge of Consciousness. I'm your host, Christine Madera. For me, and possibly for you, the inner world of consciousness has always been much more real and way more fun than the so-called real material world. Growing up, I thought I was alone in this, but I'm not. There are a lot of us, and far too many have no one to talk to who shares this experience. I've been lucky to cultivate a community of friends who love to talk about the energies, ideas, and vibrations that are pushing the edges of our own consciousness, as well as our collective consciousness. In Conversations from the Edge, we share our conversations with you. Welcome to Conversations from the Edge. This is your host, Christine Madera, and we are here with a new friend today, Amy Dempster. So Amy's wonderful passion is to understand the healing power of the earth and also how to work with the earth for your own healing, working with ancestors for your healing, doing grid work in the earth. And she brings all of this out to the world and also works with clients in this. So she does it personally and she does it as her business. And she also has a great podcast as well called The Earth Keepers. And there's some really cool things on there. And one of the things that is on there is what we're going to talk about today. So welcome, Amy. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me today, Christine. This is going to be fun.
So what would you like people to know about you that I didn't mention?
Oh, well, I am just here, right at the first of the year, just really still feeling into these energies. Man, did it feel like a whole lot of moving and shaking over the past month through the great conjunction and the solstice and the new year. And so I am just really feeling into what's next, what is here for us in 2021. And I'm excited to explore that.
Yeah, and I think that's the big question, isn't it? Because there's no going back, as it seems to be getting clearer and clearer. There's no back to normal. There is only a movement toward something that's really new and exciting. And that's actually what I wanted to talk with you about today, because on your podcast, in the middle of all of these things about nature and trees and time, which is going to be another conversation at some point, you talked about ascension. And that's one thing that, there's a lot of buzz around this idea of us as humans awakening, of ascending to a different level of operating and of moving forward in a way that is new and it's being supported in new ways. But I really liked the way that you talked about ascension. It was very concise and it was really graspable. Tell us a little bit about what ascension is and how you are experiencing it.
Yeah, I mean, in the absolute most simple form, it is, the process of ascension is just bringing our higher self and all of the other multi-dimensional versions of ourselves into our physical body and really merging all of those energies into the physical. And in doing that, shifting our consciousness to another level. So, and it can be complicated and it can go off into these, quantum physics discussions, but really it's just, the shifting of our consciousness, and everything and everyone is ascending. So, all of the humans on Earth, the Earth itself, other planets out in the cosmos, everything is ascending. And so we're all doing this together. And, some of the first things that people tend to notice, and certainly, has been my experience over the years as well, is really feeling a lot of physical symptoms. And it's because there's all of this new energy coming into the earth and interacting with our bodies. And so our bodies have to figure out how to accommodate it. And so in order to do that, what we are really feeling is pushed and triggered sometimes, and to release any old or dense energy that we no longer need. And so in doing that, usually that leads us to some type of awakening journey or spiritual path or something like that. And it's really the time when we start questioning, are the things that I've believed my entire life, do I still believe them? Are they do I feel like they're true? Are they really true? And that kind of sends us down that path. But certainly as our bodies are adjusting to this new level of light, a lot of times we just feel a lot of symptoms, a lot of headaches from energy coming in and hitting our crown chakra, heart palpitations, our bodies heating up, all of those different things that are really just our body kind of rewiring and adjusting itself to these new levels. So certainly I've had those experiences over the years.
Okay, and I have too, and a lot of people have, and I've heard it called the ascension flu. That when
Oh,
you get
absolutely.
the energy based things that your body's adjusting to, it causes a lot of the same issues as when you have a new like a bug, something that's in your body that causes inflammation. It causes all kinds of stuff as you're readjusting. And I really like the way that you have talked about this in terms of physicality, because so often for people who are kind of in the spiritual realm, even though they give lip service to the body, oftentimes it is the spiritual realm, and then there's like this inconvenient physical aspect of life that doesn't always go along with what's the excitement in the spiritual realm. But like you, like I really have experienced this expansion, not just as an expansion of consciousness in the mental sense, because they oftentimes isolate consciousness as a mental process, but the expansion of consciousness of the in the intelligence of the body, in the intelligence of the earth, in the way that everything is moving in the physical world. And I think that gets left out in a lot of ascension conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of us maybe have either memories or feelings or a sense that maybe we belong somewhere else. Maybe we shouldn't be here on earth. And
Hmm.
so it turns into this, kind of longing to get out of here. You want to go back to the stars or
Yeah.
get off of earth or be done with this, this planet. And that's the opposite of the point. And,
Yeah.
we incarnated here. Our soul chose to be here at this time and have this
Hmm.
experience. And I, say sometimes I'm like, we actually got the golden ticket, right? We got to
Hmm.
be here now. And not everybody got to be. And so although we are having to explore and experience and sometimes just deal with what it means to be in a physical body experiencing this,
Hmm.
we're doing it in a way that's not being done anywhere else. And so we're getting to experience this and do it through our bodies and through, while we're able to be on the earth and, like I say, interacting with the trees or eating a really good meal or smelling all of the wonderful, smells out in nature, all of those things that you get to do with a body that you just don't get to do elsewhere.
No, and I always think about the body as like this. Well, I shouldn't say always. I have come to think of the body once I kind of began to that process of bringing mind and body and spirit together and not thinking about them in separate realms, but to really appreciate like the innate intelligence of the body, and not just biologically or the way it's created, but the way, I mean, to me, the body is kind of like this bioenergetic antenna that is bringing in all of this energy, that is merging it with the energy that already is in the body, and that so much that you can experience so much of us of these new realms of consciousness and ascension really by surrendering to the intelligence of your body, not the impulses of the body. Like the learned impulses are a different part of the body, but the intelligence of the body, when you soften kind of the patterns and the paradigms and the thoughts and the emotions, and you begin to allow your body to operate in its highest intelligence, like it does a lot of the work for you. And I have found, when I, at one point, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, I had been really pushing physically, mentally, emotionally, everything, which is kind of my MO in parts of my life. And I decided I was just going to start taking care of myself. And that became my focus. And it was interesting that all kinds of things that I had been, quote unquote, working on Once I started taking care of myself, all happened spontaneously.
Mm.
And it wasn't because of my effort, it was because I allowed that deeper intelligence to really work itself in my body and in my world. So I was spontaneously letting go of old programming. I was spontaneously attracting speaking engagements. I was spontaneously doing all of these things that when I was depleted and using up the energy of my body rather than allowing it to regenerate itself, I was having to try to do that work and it wasn't working. But when I was finally surrendered and allowed my body to do what it does and gave it the resources to do that, like I was surprised how much of ascension happens without any kind of mental or emotional or even energetic effort. It's, if you're open to it, it like ascension seems to do you rather than you doing ascension, in my
It's
experience.
so true. It really is. We inherently, our bodies and ourselves, like we know what we're here for, and we know what we're here to do. So it's such a good point that, when we put the pieces together, they all align on their own. And that's what's been coming through for me, especially over the past month, is this idea of how much more our bodies are capable of, our physical body, our
Mhm,
energy body, all of these things, and how much of it has been dormant, and is now switching back on through this process
mhm.
of ascension and through all these activations that we're receiving. And that, yeah, that so many things are just easier than we've been led to believe, or that have been in the past. The earth was more dense, our bodies were more dense, 50, 100, 1,000 years ago than they are now. And um, in some ways, it can be really easy. And we just have to learn how these new new energies and new bodies work, which is a
I think,
process.
and one of the things I think is key is our mental processes, our egos, our learned habits and patterns are always about one, either controlling, like, oh, my body is capable of more. What can I make my body do for my idea of who I am? As opposed to, oh, my body's
Mm-hmm.
capable of more. How do I give it permission to do what it does? And that we also tend to mentally want to make things really complex. Like, that's
It's
how
so
we
true.
get emotional satisfaction from our mental processes, is to make them complex and say, oh, wow, I understood that. How smart am I? As opposed to making them simpler and easier and more streamlined, which is kind of, more energetically smooth. Because when things are too complex, it's like all these different layers. It's like one of those machines that's got 50,000 places that ball has to go through to get down, as opposed to just like dropping the ball and it roll across the
Yeah,
floor like it's going to get to
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, it's so true. And that's something that's been shown to me over and over again. And I think some of these complex ideas have been put in our heads, or we have
Hmm.
come to make them our beliefs, because of what we've seen in popular entertainment, whether it be movies or books or whatnot. And so, we think, it's all science fiction, and so it must be very complicated. And I've been shown over and over again that 9 times out of 10, whatever it is you want to accomplish can either be done in your heart or in your
Hmm.
consciousness, in some
Hmm.
way. And it's like the combination of your body and your spirit working together. But we want to make everything these series of tests, or this.
It's this
Yeah,
crazy mental game. And when you can sit back and watch like your mental game playing itself without getting involved in it, it's like, oh my gosh, like, really? Is
yes.
that what I sound like?
It's so funny. I've had the last couple of months, I've had this shift where I realize I'm telling my brain what to do in way,
Hmm.
where I all of a sudden am really conscious of the fact where I'm like, my brain is doing something completely independent
Uh-huh.
of me or what I want to do right now. And so it was only after kind of having this conversation in my head enough times where I'm going, stop it, brain. We're not doing that right now. That I realized,
Totally.
wow, my brain really is independent from me and my consciousness.
Mhm. Well, and that's such a jump and a leap, because and I've just actually been writing about this in the book I'm writing, which will eventually come out someday, that it really, if we can begin to think about all of those all of the concepts that we have about life, about reality, about ourselves, all of the processes that support those concepts, all of that whole thing as its own matrix that's not us, it's not me, it's an it, it's not an I. You know, the ideas about life are an it rather than reality. Like then you can
Hmm.
really start to get that space of, oh, hold on. Yeah, my brain is doing something and having these thoughts and doing these things, but I can see it as a separate process than how I see myself. And that
Yeah.
that really is this kind of able to wedge open the door between living in duality, which is kind of the old model, and opening to this place of unity, which is part of the ascension process in my experience. And part of the unity, like the primary part of the unity in our experience is the unity within ourself. So from our energetic self, our body, our biology, but also without having the gatekeeper of that kind of ego consciousness that's always keeping things separate. So
Yeah.
when you can look at that ego consciousness as something that is an it's created. David Hawkins calls it a little puppy. Think of it as a puppy. It doesn't know it's doing wrong things. Just think it's a pet. And you have to like, think of it as a little puppy and treat it that way. And when
Yeah.
you do that, then you can start to disentangle from identifying with the puppy as you, identifying with, like, stop identifying with your thoughts as you, with, your whole processes of your life that are just happening that aren't really you and are just kind of in the constructed reality as opposed to that deeper reality. It does make it easier to recognize and allow ascension to happen without making it personal or part of your identity or something that is really jarring to you in your life, because you realize that it's something that's just happening. It's happening, you ride with it, you flow with it, you adapt with it, but have to you don't have to let your all of your ego programming interact with it in order to find place with it. Like it's just that's a separate thing. You kind of get on the fast track, you let it happen, and then you wake up the puppy and you say, look,
Right.
this is
Here's
what's
where we're
happening
going.
now. Yeah. um
Right. Get with the program.
yeah, so that's kind of how I've been doing that as well. But ascension to me really seems like if you can get out of that whole thing, like you were talking about, like seeing what's happening in your brain not as me but as like, oh, that's a process that's happening that I don't know why it's doing that, but it is. It
I know
makes
it's just
that
running a
process of
program that's been there
ascension.
my whole
It
life.
does. Yeah, that it
Yeah.
makes the whole ascension process so much better because you doesn't have to run it through your personality structure.
Yeah, it's a good point. And it's, one of the things that seems so clear to me about, the experience we've had in the past year, and I'm sure will continue to be
Hmm.
in a similar intensity in this year, is really, I think a lot of these things that are really rising to the surface are letting us see and deal with this idea of duality, because it's easy for
Hmm.
us to sit here and say, oh, we're shifting to unity consciousness, we're shifting
Hmm.
to where everyone is one, and we're all we're all in the same vibration and frequency, which we are, but we just don't totally believe it as a as
Hmm.
humanity at this point. And so
Yeah.
we want to think that, one day we're just going to wake up and it's going to be different, but it's not. And we're in this messy middle right
No.
now where we're having to, wake up and go, okay, wait a minute, hold on. Just because this, I believe this doesn't mean the opposite is wrong.
Right.
It's just another idea, it's just another belief, it's just another version of this idea kind of being worked out
Hmm.
here on the earth plane, and I can let that be okay. I can be over here doing my thing, and I can let somebody else have their thing, whatever that is. And
Yes.
so what we've seen though is how attached we are to
Hmm.
our ideas of, my idea is right and that person's idea is wrong. And what it's really doing is just giving us that opportunity. And to your point about, kind of your brain being separate from it, when we can let some of those things go and say, oh, okay, that's not me, or that is me. It's all us, and we're all figuring this out together. Then we don't have to be so attached to being right, or finding the real truth, and you have the truth and nobody else has the truth.
The
Go
crazy
ahead.
part of that is we change our minds all the time. And no matter what we
So
change it to,
true.
we think we're right. So it's like that it's actually a brain function. It's part of the hardware, or the bio whatever template of how we're put together, that we think we're right. I mean, it keeps us from kind of sitting and stewing in indecision while the saber-toothed tiger runs after you. It's
Right.
a brain function. It's a quality. It's a personality function. It's a brain function. It's something that happens. It's impersonal. Everybody has that, and yet, despite all the evidence that we change our minds often several times a day, and about big things many, many times throughout our life, there's that part of us that is still believes that whatever our story of the moment is truth, even though 10 minutes earlier
Right.
we might have had an entirely different story and that was truth. And in looking at
Right.
things like that, you can demonstrate to yourself, oh, look at that's just part of how it's constructed. That doesn't have anything
Yeah.
to do with what's really true. It's this little part of me that is functional, that says whatever I think in the moment I believe to be true, and they think they're true. It's just how we're
Right.
constructed, and we
Right.
prove it to ourselves daily or monthly. I mean, sometimes every 5 or 10 minutes,
Well,
depending
I
on what
just
it
say,
is.
the best place to see it all play out is Facebook, right?
Oh my gosh, it's
I mean,
crazy.
somebody puts a post up and says, this is what I believe. And there are people, 47 comments deep that are all there to argue why that's absolutely right or absolutely wrong.
Hmm.
And instead of just saying, wow, maybe all of these truths are correct, or maybe none of them are,
Yeah,
you
maybe
know,
they're all just points of view. They're all
but
perspectives.
we want this opportunity to prove for sure that we are the right ones. And so that's what I think is this interesting place we're in, and sometimes frustrating, in
Oh yeah.
this kind of period of ascension or process of ascension, is we're being given the opportunity in our day-to-day lives to work this out.
Yeah.
What is duality? What does this mean? What does it mean? What does it mean to love everybody? How does that feel? Can you really do that? And that's really where we're working our way through moment by moment.
Yeah, and seeing some of the impersonal personality structures that get in the way, and having some distance from those. Like, so, just like you were talking about your brain doing its own thing, when we understand how those things are structured, it makes it a little bit less like part of your personal identity. There's one thing
It's
though that we
true.
kind of glossed over that I want to for sure talk about in this particular podcast, because it's related to ascension, and it's a new idea for a lot of people, that we're not individually on this earth all ascending in our own process because I choose to ascend. Like, we're ascending because the galaxy is expanding. Earth is ascending and expanding. The energies of Earth are expanding. The energies coming from the center of the galaxy to Earth are different than what they were before. We're moved out of this protective belt into something that has much more intense energy. Like, this is not just you having this, oh my gosh, I need to ascend moment. It's all of us together as a planet, as a people, as all of this energy ascending together, which also makes it feels very personal because we're all going through our piece of it, but it's also impersonal in the sense that this is something that's happening. It's kind of like COVID. Like, if you got sick, it felt really personal. If you lost your job, it felt really personal, but it was impersonal in that this happened to everybody all at the same time.
Yeah.
So it wasn't personal to you. And ascension can feel really, in my view, um, destabilizing when you think of it in terms of me ascending by myself in isolation and separation from everybody else. But, or that all this stuff is happening to me personally and not to everybody else. But when we can realize that, like, everything is moving through this at one time, it's not trying to destabilize you personally. It is actually shifting everything, and you're shifting along with it whether you want to or not. So you can choose to move with it, or you can choose to kind of fight it, but it's happening nonetheless. Whether you believe it's true or not, it's happening, and you can see it around you. And when you can begin to kind of lean into that and feel the collective nature of it, there's a lot of more stability and grace in the process than if you're taking it personally and you feel like you're this isolated person on this isolated planet having this experience that is personal to you.
Yeah, and I think, for people who've been going through this process, 10, 20, 30 years, it probably felt that way. And even for me, it felt that way, 15
Hmm.
years ago when it was
Yeah,
not
me
as
too.
much, stuff on the internet or, books to be able to pick up, and
Hmm.
just seeing how accessible all of the information is now shows how widespread it is. But yeah, I mean, I think if you really knew what was up and wanted to put yourself in a bubble and send back any energy related to the ascension, I guess you
Hmm.
probably could. But you're right. These codes and this information, it's all coming down really from the sun,
Yeah.
primarily, and there's nobody on Earth who is not receiving
Hmm.
these codes. And so, when I talk about this a lot, oftentimes I get people that reach out and say, but what about my spouse, my kid, my
Hmm.
brother, whoever that's refused, they're not awake, they're completely asleep. It's okay.
Yeah,
It's
totally.
okay. And, everybody, we came here at this very specific time
Hmm.
in Earth's experience, as knowing what we were getting into, and not everybody wanted to quote unquote wake up at the same time
Yeah.
or have that awakening experience at all. But that doesn't mean that they weren't, or are not highly advanced beings who are playing a role and are a part
Hmm.
of the process all the same. And so no matter what, and no matter what it may look like on the outside, these energies are coming in and affecting us, and they really are. It comes straight through, and if you've had this experience, you know what it feels like. these
Hmm.
these codes and these vibrations come down, they hit your crown chakra, and they make their way through your body. And you can sometimes, there are different levels of intensity, but you'll feel them working all the way through your body and
Hmm.
out your feet and into the earth. And so the earth is then receiving those activations as well. And then the earth sends those vibrations back up into your body, and you feel it working its way back up. And we can't avoid it. It is
No.
affecting us. It's rewiring us. It's, up leveling us, and it's pushing us to let go of the old things.
Well, and with all rewiring, when you do this, there's things that are kind of, in the way that need to get worked out. And so I think of all the kind of chaos that we have going on around as things working themselves out. And in that, you have to have everybody playing different parts in that, or they don't get worked
Hmm.
out.
Right.
So to say this person's not awake because they believe this, or they're doing that. I mean, it's tempting because, who doesn't love to judge, right? To realize and to that just like you wouldn't want to you wouldn't be able to kind of streamline all of these energies in your body without working itself out. It would really like blow out your body, right?
Yeah,
It would so
totally.
destabilize you. I mean, you could die. But so it takes a while to work that stuff out in your body. It takes a while to work out the energies and the thought processes and the concepts and things that we're all working through together. And you need to have different people playing different parts, and to just like give everybody a break, because just because they're playing a certain kind of part in this doesn't mean that, they're wrong.
Right.
You
Or
might
that
not
they're
like what
more
they're
advanced or
doing.
less advanced or
Yeah.
any of that kind of stuff. It
Yes,
just
absolutely.
it just is. And yeah, I mean, you're right. It takes time to work them out. We don't just say, "Oh, I had an activation and now I'm different." What we start saying is things like, "I just can't keep going to this job anymore. I just can't
Yeah.
be in this relationship anymore. I just can't keep living life like this." And that is the process. That's what's happening. And it's saying, get rid of these things that are not a match
Hmm.
for you anymore.
Yeah, and work it through, because it's not like you said before, you're not going to wake up someday and the entire Like you're going to be in a different house with a different room with a different job, and it's all going
Right.
to happen. You know,
Right. You
you
have to
go
do
through the
something.
process of that happening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to be present in that process. All right, so Amy, why don't you tell us how people can reach you and what you want them to know about you in reaching you, and then we'll wrap up this conversation.
Well, I have a website called Following Hawks, like the bird. And so that is where my blog, my podcast, all of those things can be found. So it is followinghawks.com. I'm also Following Hawks on Instagram, and I have a Facebook community that people can join as well of all of these conversations. And I talk about all of these things, not just ascension, but especially, my connection is really with the earth itself, and really understanding how we can come back into resonance with the earth and back into our proper place in this ecosystem. And so lots of what I share and talk about is all related to connecting with the earth in that way.
And we will talk more about that in ongoing conversations. So thank you so much for being here, and we will talk again soon.
Thank you for having me.
This is your host, Christine Madera. I hope you've enjoyed this conversation from the edge of consciousness. You can find all our conversations at conversationsfromtheedge.net. You'll also find links to schedule a private conversation with me or any of my friends, as well as tools to help you expand your own consciousness and explore what's possible for you outside the boundaries of your current perceptions. Feel free to use this podcast to start your own conversation by sharing it with friends, on social media, in your blog, or even in your own podcast. And as always, live the adventure of pushing your own edge. It's the most amazing adventure there is.